Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other light-strewn host.
Light-strewn? Yeah, I'm kind of sitting in the light here. It's nice.
Sitting in front of the window with all the passers-by looking at our sing.
Yeah, so we obviously just moved into the neighborhood. Imagine walking past and being like, oh, I wonder what those... Oh, that's not... I'm not going to say the word I was about to say. Wonder what those gays are like.
We can say that word.
We can say that. I probably shouldn't say it on the podcast, especially if your sister is potentially secretly listening.
It might be a cold splash of water in the first couple of seconds of the podcast. Yeah.
But like, oh, I wonder what those gays are up to. And then looking in and the two of us sitting... not parallel, like at different areas in the table, so it doesn't have too much crosstalk. Talking into microphones and on a picnic table, essentially, with our cat trying to climb up our chimney. And now he wants out, and he will want back in within 5 seconds.
Momentarily.
Come on, look here. That's some great audio.
Yeah, it's difficult being a parent. So we are here today.
Oh my god, Joel, I didn't tell you.
What?
Last night, this morning, I had a dream, okay?
Okay.
It was, you know those early morning, like, fever dreams?
Mm-hmm. Know them well.
So, this morning, I was having a dream that you and I had organised for a surrogacy for a child. And I was like, oh fuck, how are we going to find out who it was that we like got as our surrogate, because we realized that it was 9 months later and we completely forgotten about it, and we had just like left it aside, and we'd done all this like moving and everything, and we hadn't actually planned for having a baby. And I was like, oh fuck's sake, we're gonna have to give up one of our rooms to the fucking child. But I was like, how do you find out who it was? Because I can't remember now. So I like looked.
Where's the receipt?
I searched on my WhatsApp to find out infected.
Okay.
And that brought up, like, I was like, okay, great. It's our friend Doreena's friend Mary or somebody. And actually, I think she does have a friend Mary, so I'm not sure if it was her. Anyway.
We're Irish. We all have a friend called Mary.
Exactly. I don't have any friends called... No, I have an old friend called Mary Ann.
You do.
It's different. But the... Anyway, I found out who it was, and we were both like, oh, fuck, why did we do this? And we're like, can we abandon it now?
This is a bold start. Do you think this has anything to do with that weird pregnancy we saw on Evil the other night? Like possessed, where the fetus was possessed rather than the mother?
Oh, how did that end? Oh, I fell asleep before that ended, did I?
You did. We don't know how it ended because you did fall asleep.
Was that the season 2 opener?
Yes.
Okay. Here, let's give your Buffy and summary and we'll launch into our Bronze Banter.
Absolutely. This is season 6, episode 17 of Buffy Normal Again.
Yeah, it was first aired on March 12th, 2002. It was directed by... what's wrong with me? I can't read my own fucking handwriting. Either Rick or Nick Rosenthal, who is the director of Halloween 2 and Halloween Resurrection. He's never directed Buffy before, but he does go on to direct the episode Help as well. He's done a lot of TV directing work. I don't have it noted here, but I think he did a bunch of Smallville. But he's married to Nancy Stevens, who was Nurse Marion Chambers in Halloween 1. And he met her, she's also in H2O, and she's going to be in Halloween Kills as the same character. And they met on set in Halloween 2. But do you remember it's the nurse who takes care of Michael?
That's cool.
Yeah, so he's married to her, and it was written by Diego Gutierrez, who was didn't write any other episodes of Buffy or Angel, but was Joss Whedon's personal assistant. So people have theory about this episode essentially, because it feels like quite Joss Whedon-y as an episode, I think, in terms of the structure and everything. And given that this is his personal assistant, he doesn't that people think that basically Joss Whedon had a much larger hand in writing this, but possibly had commitments with Angel and stuff, and wasn't supposed to be being too present with Buffy or whatever. But and especially given like the quality of the episode, it doesn't feel like a new writer's first time out the gate kind of thing.
Yeah, and it feels very, very comfortable with the characters. That being said...
Yeah, the writer does go on to write for Without a Trace, from Dusk to Dawn, the series, and then another show called Monarcha. But yeah, just it was an interesting one. Anyway, go on, what were you saying?
It's interesting they wrote for From Dusk to Dawn, because I was listening to a podcast about vampires recently, about how that is like one of the earliest examples of like breaking the gothic vampire trope, because even Buffy goes in like the vampires in this are generally reasonably beautiful and swarthy and mysterious a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think they're modern vampires a la Susan Rice, I think, in Buffy.
Anne Rice.
Anne Rice, yes.
Yeah. Who's Susan Rice?
Don't know.
Her bitter sister.
Yeah.
Whereas From Dusk to Dawn, which is Quentin Tarantino property, which is problematic in a number of ways, but it does have quite monstrous vampires as beasts, and which leads on to things like 30 Days of Night, which has like very animalistic vampires.
This is From Dusk to Dawn, the series, which comes far later. I don't know much about it at all.
Yeah.
So here's your Buffy summary. Poisoned by one of the Troika's demons.
We're not calling it a troika. This is a search and replace that happened.
Yeah, what the fuck? Anyway, Buffy drifts in and out of a reality in which she is not chosen as Slayer but went mad with delusions. A psychiatrist convinces her she will only be sane if she destroys her imaginary friends and leaves Willow, Xander and Dawn. No Oxford comma there. Very problematic. I'll come back to that. Trust where the demon can kill them. Just in time, she opts for her delusions and saves them with help from Tara. The other realities Joyce mourns as Buffy lapses into catatonia. My grandfather died at Christmas. And
Segue.
The gravestone just went up a couple of weeks ago, and there's no Oxford comma in it. And I made a comment on it, and I was like to my father, whose dad it was, and immediately I was like, oh, this is one of those times where I have to be less me.
Yeah.
Which was great.
Before we move on from that Buffy Ann summary, which was great and I enjoyed it, can I give a bonus Buffy Ann summary of the season 6 box set that I found?
Oh, please do, yeah.
Okay, so we use these DVDs every week, watch Buffy, and I want to go back and look at the back of the others because I was kneeling down, plugging into the PlayStation with my old man knees, taking time to get up off the floor. I read the back of this season 6 box set, and it has feverish energy to it. So I'm just going to go straight into it. Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar, grapples with balancing both her enchanting femininity and unrelenting formidability as she copes with being a beautiful, sexy young woman as well as saviour of the world. Previously, she had sacrificed her own life for her sisters, which, although harrowing, now gives Buffy a maturity she has never enjoyed before. But along with growth comes even more treacherous obstacles. If you think you've seen everything so far, wait until you discover what happens this season. Buffy's destiny draws her deeper into the netherworld, while above ground, her relationship with Spike takes some unexpectedly inhuman turns. Will Buffy keep it together while the evil axis of demonic destruction around her tears everything apart? Well, we'll have to find out now, won't we? Like, that is someone who has pieced together Buffy from screenshots.
Yeah, that's a wild trip.
Yeah. So a real focus on her sultry, alluring, sexy, Slayer femininity and all this kind of stuff. So we might unpack that as we go through this episode. But before we do that, we're going to veer over to the bronze for our state mandated banter. And what have we been bantering here in the new BBHQ about this week? We were, as we mentioned last week, we've been watching Evil, which is the new TV show by the same creators as The Good Wife. And actually, importantly, The Good Fight came back this last week, and it was great. Season 5 opener. I think that people underappreciate The Good Fight because it's absolutely fucking bonkers at times. Like, it goes into animated musical
segments and all this stuff. I think it's at times reaches some of the heights of The Good Wife. The Good Wife had a grounding, which I think really helped it. But The Good Fight is bonkers and it's brilliant. I fucking love it. And I think it's not a critic's darling at all. Yeah. And it should be. Anyway.
Well, just very briefly, The Good Fight season 5 opener had to grapple with basically the year, skipping forward, the year of COVID. It was kind of originally the story was pre that. And they they have this obnoxiously wonderful device of doing the opening credits sometimes very late in the episode to make a point. And in this episode, the entire thing was sequential previously ons that summarize what happened to the characters over the last year. And then the credits happened in the last couple of minutes of the show. You know, like ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
But as you say, we watched more of Evil. We binged it, which I think we've covered the premise of, but it's essentially psychologist teams up with priest in training to deal with potential possessions, and it really, really works the format.
It really does.
Works
the horror of it is so much fun.
Yeah, like I think if you like The Conjuring and that husband and wife pair, kind of the procedural aspect of it.
I have something even better to say to you, Joel. If you like Buffy, you probably like Evil.
I think that's absolutely fair. And actually, the protagonist, Kristen, a bad bitch. Like,
she has Buffy energy. Like, at a couple of points, she has done stuff which has felt like Buffy with less of a moral code.
Yeah.
But she will get it done, and it is great. I've absolutely loved it so far.
And like we watch a lot of horror, big fans of it. It's been a long time since I've been behind my fingers squealing at something because it's so like shocking and it's not cheap.
Yeah, and it's also it's at the same time it's like the perfect horror TV show level, because so many horror TV shows go hard early and then fizzle out. So I'm thinking your Bly Manors and your Hill House, obviously the same property essentially, or anything by Ryan Murphy. The first episode or two is usually like shocking and intense, and then as it goes on you're like, oh no, it just devolves into camp. This starts out reasonably camp and sprinkles horror in throughout while maintaining decent drama. It's like interactions, like fantasy segments.
It touches the anthology to it as well, because they have fairly self-contained, this is the episode where misery happens to someone, this is the episode where this, and they really kind of go deep on that genre. So yeah, can't recommend it enough.
And season 2 is just starting now, so it's a great time to jump on it. We also watched we went to see A Quiet Place last Tuesday, just after we finished
part 2.
Part 2. I finished recording this episode, or our Buffy Boys episode last week. It was a ton of fun. Wasn't as good as the first one, I think, by a long shot, in the sense that like the first one was quite something else altogether. It was a brilliant horror action cinema experience, touching. John Krasinski is very attractive, etc.
So I have a great theory about this, actually, or I think it's great. I think it might be interesting to talk about. It wasn't necessarily as good as the first one, but it was good. It was billed as The Quiet Place Part 2, so it really is meant to be the second half of the story. Yeah. And almost everything that's opened in the last couple of weeks in terms of cinema has been sequels to established horror franchises.
Oh, sure.
So,
Conjuring.
The Conjuring, Spiral from the Book of Saw, so it's a Saw film.
Sure.
And stuff like that. And I think partly the reason for that is it's fairly savvy, because horror always brings people to the cinema. People always go to see horror.
So horror is a specific cinema experience. Experiencing horror in the cinema versus at home are very different.
Yeah, and you don't want to necessarily bank on a completely original IP as the opening thing. So it's like, okay, The Conjuring, I know those guys, I know what's going to happen, but you kind of go. So I think that's kind of partly why it's happened that way. It
was also just really nice to be in the cinema, though it was absolutely like empty. So obviously people are just like quite anxious about going back to cinema. But it was quite pleasant as well. Sorry, it was unusual. Here's a warning, especially for Irish viewers. I'm not sure if it's the same in other places. The ads before the movie were non-existent. It was like 8-9 minutes of ads, because there are so few movies coming out, and because no one wants to pay to advertise before a movie at the moment, because it's big bucks for a little return at the moment. So just, you can usually be like, 20 minutes before I can rock into the screen, 20 minutes late, it'd be fine. Not for this one. And
the ads that were there were all a multitude of kind of roughly put together Singer-Rug original ads being like, please come back to the cinema.
Yeah, we were like, we're already here. We're here. But I'm kind of tempted not to come back anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But good, the flick itself was fun. It had a similar energy. Or like it was worthy of the energy of the first film, which is a fantastic film. It had, I think, a very competent mix of being the same again, but also some new stuff to it.
Yeah,
it was a very interesting film, a worthwhile watch. Maybe not. It's not going to go into the canon.
No,
but it was fun. Good.
I totally agree. And then the third thing we're going to talk about briefly is that Toucan Birdie is back. Season 2 opened. Actually, did we talk about this previously? I think we did. Season 2 opened up.
I don't think we did.
Okay, it started up again last week, and it's now 2 episodes in. Toucan Birdie, I've mentioned it before. One of my absolute favorite adult cartoons. It talks about trauma and growing up and adulthood, and its bizarro fantasy animal nonsense brilliance. If you just go watch Toucan Birdie, and especially because it got cancelled off Netflix, it got picked up by Adult Swim. Oh, was it Adult Swim?
I think it was Adult Swim.
Well, it's a good home for it. So it is 100% worth watching. The first season is immaculate, and it should be on Netflix still.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's particularly valuable to us because I think it was the first, like when it was cancelled, it was so devastating because it was so clearly good.
Yeah,
and it's still a beacon of hope because like it was like one of these things where like it's never going to happen, and then it got picked up again. It's like, okay, there is a spark of good.
Yeah.
Left in the world.
Speaking of realities where this whole TV show might never have happened.
Oh, that's great. I was also going to say, speaking of TV shows with strong female protagonists, which were cancelled and then picked up by another network.
Mine's
yours are better. Yeah.
So in Buffy this week, it is kind of the episode I think that we've, as I said last week, referred to the most without knowing the name. Normal again, it is the one where Buffy's in an asylum. I don't like the phrase insane asylum. I'm going to say asylum for the rest of the episode. It's not like, and that's probably what the episode would describe it as. It's not a lovely term. It's not a very nice term. Mental health institution is kind of mouthy and kind of inaccurate for what this is, really.
Like, at the end of the day, it does portray it as very stereotypical. She says, I went crazy and I was put in an asylum and she's in a straitjacket and all that. It's very, like,
in terms
tropic.
Of, yeah, exactly. And in terms of its, like, dealing with the language around mental health, it is far from exemplary. So maybe just bear that in mind if that's something that would upset you watching or listening to this episode of Buffy Boys, which is the podcast of which you are listening to right now. Hello.
So, first impressions, what do you think of the episode?
Oh, I love this episode.
I thought it was great. I thought it was one of the best episodes we've watched in a while.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think it's a real high point of season 6 so far. One of the high points, because obviously Once More feeling is immaculate. It was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a classic, and it's done really well. It's quite self-contained, but it's also a very nice pivot for the season, and we'll come to that kind of in a little bit. So Joe, first question right at the gate: lore implications. Are there any in terms of, this is all fake? What do you think?
It's real. Is the most important thing to come out of this. I think it's definitely actually happening in terms of the universe of the story. But I think it's a fascinating conversation to have.
Yeah,
and it is.
It's very clearly influenced by Saint Elsewhere. The whole thing was inside of a snow globe of a boy is playing with.
Yeah.
Like, it's very clearly influenced by that kind of stuff.
But see, I actually think that's a fantastic comparison, because anyone, if you haven't read about Saint Elsewhere before, look it up, because there's a great map of it and it's kind of a great classic TV trope. But essentially what happened with Saint Elsewhere was a very popular kind of hospital-based primetime drama in America, I want to say in the 80s, and the last episode had a child looking into a snow globe, and it basically kind of said, okay, and all these other characters came into the room. I was like, it's a dream. The entire story of St. Elsewhere has happened within the snow globe, which contains a hospital, and he's been imagining it. But the implication was, because there's been so many crossovers with other shows in St. Elsewhere, and those shows themselves have crossed over and linked with massive franchises
Friends.
like Law and Order, which connects with so many things.
Yeah, there's that one guy who's a police in Law and Order who ends up being in everything else as well, right? As that same character.
Well, yeah, so the actor Richard Belzer has played Detective Munch in maybe 12 different television programs, including X-Files.
So the implication being that all these things are in a snow globe. Yeah,
but it's actually a great point of reference for this, because that seems like initially you hear that, it's like, oh, my brain is enormous and like all these things are fictional. But as people kind of pointed out, it's like, well, what if the kid was including fictional characters in his show or in his imagination? Do you know
what if he was a viewer of the show and this is the, and experience
so
it is.
Exactly. So there's no proof positive that just because you can connect something means it is happening. And that's the same with this here, because people have often looked at Normal Gang and being like, the question of like, does this say demonstrably within the lore that it potentially is fictional? And it's like this artistic license.
100%.
Yeah?
So this is the postmodernist problem. Postmodernism, for people who aren't aware, is mostly it's a historical period of art. So it would come after modernism, which traditionally is kind of bordered by the Victorian era, ending in around 1890 to the mid 20th century. So classic modernist authors, so we're obviously both book people, so this is kind of how we define it, would be your Joyces, your Virginia Woolf, Ezra Pound, Hemingway. And then your postmodernists would be kind of what came after that. And it's a response to modernism, where modernism attempted for this psychological truth in things. Postmodernism said there is no truth to be had. Very influenced by Derrida and post-structuralism, where you say that like the meaning of things doesn't exist within a text or anything. Everything's pointing towards a thing which doesn't actually exist. So postmodern texts will often feature awareness of its own narrativeness. So meta textual aspects is a huge meta-textual aspects are a really huge postmodernist trait. So a lot of your like community TV shows and stuff like that, which has huge amounts of postmodernism and metatextuality, are like, yeah, they're postmodern texts. It's a really lovely way to play with, and like, you know, the best postmodern texts, for example, House of Leaves, really play with the sense of metatextuality and you know, texts within texts, an awareness of the reality outside of those texts, but they're all deeply problematic in terms of what it's actually delivering, and it's a huge anxiety around truth and story in the 20th century, which hasn't translated hugely well, though I'm sure that we'll come to appreciate it as time goes on. You know, in the wake of modernism was received well, like, you know, in the years afterwards, and the years after postmodernism, which we are currently entering into a postmodern kind of narrative world. I think that we're going to see postmodernism as being very dated and very weak. But so to bring us back, the issue here, you know, this is the real. You know, within this text, the real is not the real that you've seen. It's like, cool, neither of those things are significant.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with kind of everything you've framed there, and I think it actually really interestingly ties into some of the problems we have in fandom, and some of the problems we have in how metatextuality has become, which is a useful thing in moderation, has kind of curdled as like such a gotcha moment, and the worst examples we see is where people, you know, point out inconsistencies within a story, and then take them to their logical extremes, where it's like, so that means, etc. It's like, no, you are able to selectively interpret elements of a story.
It's one of the major problems with postmodernism is that it doesn't teach readers to question the structure of stories, and instead says, you know, that truth that you're seeking within this text, it's not that it's not there, it's that it's more complicated and can only be accessed via internet forums. Yeah. And that is not a truth of a text. The truth of a text is your experience of the text. The truth of a text is never an answer. So the truth of Buffy is not an answer. The truth of Buffy is what it's trying to communicate. Yeah. What Buffy is trying to communicate in this episode, I would argue, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before the episode started. This is Buffy taking hold of her own growth and saying, I can look at this reality of slipping away, returning to childhood, going back to my parents, going back to the almost like, you know, the white, comfortable, amniotic fluid filled womb that's being offered to her in this situation. No dawn, no problems, no sadness, and saying, no, I'm going to embrace my own existence and reality. And so really, and that is very clearly what the text is trying to say about Buffy's journey, and pursuing a thing where you say, oh, actually, this is all not happening, it shows the problem of postmodernism, in the sense that instead of seeing the clear and well communicated meaning of a text, or where sometimes it has meaning, as being like, you know, a trick is a trick is inherently more valuable than like a straightforward expression. I mean, like, you know, Buffy's journey through Buffy the Vampire Slayer is important, and to say like, oh, none of it matters is funny, but it's not. It's clearly not what the text is trying to communicate.
And what I would say speaks to that, and if I would be as bold as to say it, is in terms of some of the commentary around this episode. You know, at various points, both Rick Rosenthal, the director, and Joss Whedon has said, oh, you know, maybe it isn't real, you know, that's up to the reader to decide, maybe it's actually all in her head, etc. Whereas what I think is fascinating is that Marty Noxon, more director, was like, no, this is a fake out, it is a you know, a joke with the audience, it's making a commentary, but it absolutely can't be the actual truth of the show, because the point of Buffy is that women can be empowered. Yeah. And that Buffy is trying to make a point about the agency that all these women have taken throughout the show. So if you say that it didn't actually happen, I actually think that it potentially, if it may be so bogus to say, like that is a split between kind of like the feminist gaze and the female gaze interpreting text, and the male gaze, where it's like it is
logocentric, you know, oh, let's take this to its logical, like, you know, like, oh, look, that text,
it's all a game.
That shot at the end where she's like, you know, still in the institution, and they're saying, oh, we've lost her. It's like, oh, that is the more real, so that must be the truth of it. It's like, the truth of it is that they're very clearly communicating Buffy's strength and growth and humanity. And if you've looked over that and said, oh no, the actual truth of Buffy is that she's actually an institution, like, we're watching different TV shows.
Yeah, and yet you participate in society.
Exactly.
Interesting, yeah.
And like, it really supports a lot of like essentialist feminist readings of texts, which I don't agree with, but it's an interesting way to view text. So essentialism in feminism would suggest that men have a different way of approaching things and viewing things than women, and that leads to which, obviously not the case, probably in terms of actually sociological implications of that are quite difficult. But men tend towards single point solutions for problems, and women trend towards multiple point solutions and etc. And obviously that's all extremely binary, if absolutely nothing else, which is useless. But this really supports that, where it's saying, oh, the masculine approach to this solution, masculine solution to this problem is, oh my God, maybe it was all a dream. Maybe it was all this person dreaming up these things.
Neat, tied up, kind of.
Yeah, and the feminine solution might be to suggest, oh, this is an interesting contrast to what Buffy's experienced throughout this. It's an offer of safety and comfort in the quote unquote real world, but she returns to her metaphorical messy journey, and that is like, a less easy solution, but it's better.
Yeah, no, so I absolutely see that, and I think that it actually speaks a lot to how this is kind of a subgenre of genre TV, which is it was all a dream, but specifically when it's like an alternate reality, or potentially that that the fantastic elements of the story contained within the kind of imagination of one of the actual protagonists, and when used kind of as window dressing, it's just like a monster of the week thing, whatever. But this is one of the earliest, one of the best examples of using it to convey a point, and shares DNA with a fantastic episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which is called Beyond the Stars, where basically Deep Space Nine has a black captain of the station, and it frames that he is actually a black writer in the 1950s trying to write for astonishing stories, experiencing racism in that environment in America, and
he's written this like idealistic
future where he can be the captain and everyone works together and collaborates. And one of the things both within that episode, which is wonderful, and Buffy, is that the voices in the supposed reality try to use the inconsistencies of the story world as a leverage to prove that can't be true. So they say, how could a black man ever be the captain of a space station? And then to Buffy,
which, to be fair, like in the 90s when DS9 was coming out, yeah, I mean, like, a black person being the head of a space station, of a arm of government, so unlikely in America.
Yeah, I mean, like being portrayed as a religious figure and a single father and all that kind of stuff. DS9 is a whole different show we could do. With Buffy, the questions that her doctor in the alternate reality presents to her is things like, there's all these inconsistencies here in terms of how Dawn just got introduced because you needed this family bond, to how your relationships are always so overblown and like dramatic. And what I thought was a really surprising and useful bit of commentary is, you used to have these really clear themes, Buffy, and your fantasy. You used to have the grand villains you fought against, and now you're fighting three weirdos you went to high school with. Like this is starting to collapse, which I actually think really bolsters the value of season 6, because it actually says that there's some intentionality to making the season messier.
And also it really sets up the pins really well for the rest of the season, because that is the point of the trio, is that they are ridiculous until they're not. They are ridiculous, useless men until they are like murderers, and they're murderers at this point. But like, the Seeing Red obviously is going to be another. No, Seeing Red.
Seeing Red,
yeah, is going to be like a complete, like such an escalation of that point. Such a fascinating, horrifying, brutal injection of reality, so it like, yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it really works in that way as well.
And it's a great, as an episode itself, it's a great adventure episode, because it really brings everyone in.
It weaves in the individual storylines of Xander and Willow into it. Dawn a little bit too.
Yeah, it has a kind of very measured way in which Buffy becomes kind of a threat at one point. And I think that her not taking the antidote and then trying to decide between whether killing her friends to get out of the delusion or not is very well tempered. And so she's not like arch, but you do get this thing of, which is always quite compelling when you have a very powerful hero, is what happens if they're not on your side. You know, it's always a massive threat. Like, what if Buffy actually wanted to like tie you up? She absolutely could do it. And I think that the stakes are high, and I think that there's like a lot of there's very little in this episode of people having to make stupid decisions to get into dangerous situations. Like, as soon as something starts going wrong, they try to fix it. They try to fix it sensibly. They say the things we would want them to say. And Willow's like, I'm going to do this, but bear in mind, it's not magic. It's just a medicinal herb. You know, it's all this over. It's kind of bringing it together. You know?
Yeah, I think it's also really fascinating as well, because it brings in a very, like, one of the great fears that like this kind of mental health horror brings to the table. So much mental health horror where it's saying question your reality is brought to, it brings a real sense of horror to people, especially people who are, you know, potentially feel like they might have some mental health problems themselves, of like, you know, what is reality? Because when you have Xander and Willow saying, well, of course this is real, like, how could this not be real? You kind of feel Buffy's like, well, of course you would say that, you know, and that kind of like affirmations or things that you want to hear and be true, and that potentially being the ultimate thing that isn't true. There's a real tension there of like, you know, of fear and undermining of reality, and like reality is so easy to undermine in a text, and especially and in real world if you experience any kind of psychosis in any way. That you kind of get that horror in this is very interesting. Yeah,
and it's why that kind of mental health infused horror is so fertile and is so challenging, because
Babadook.
Because if your lens is dirty, you know, if the call,
I'm not sure if that's the metaphor we want to use.
No, well, no. So what? Okay, maybe a better way of articulating that is.
I would just say not to use the word dirty. So if your lens is
I actually sorry. Let me give me an opportunity to clarify that. I actually mean really, really literally, because I'm thinking like if you have a camera and there's a smudge on it.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I meant. As in like if your perception of the world is not as objective as it could be, if your view is being influenced by something. If the call is coming from inside your head, you know what I mean, you can't run from it.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously not speaking about mental health in general. I'm talking about
the concept of mental horror. Yeah, for sure.
That's why I say, for example, like one of the classic, like Freddy Krueger is so terrifying, because you can't hide from him. He's inside, you know? Mm-hmm. So with this, once Buffy's viewpoint is poisoned by this demonic influence, it doesn't need to do anything more, because what happens to her in her delusion, quote unquote, fuels self-perpetuatingly the fears that she has. And I actually think that what it leads to is some really, really tremendous character work in this episode. I think things that really elevate this episode for me, one is I don't want to say revelation, but it's presented like a revelation when Willow's like, this isn't happening to you. You've never been committed. You've never been in an asylum. And Buffy's like, but I actually was. You know, before.
It's a heartbreaking moment.
It is. Sarah Michelle Gellar is genuinely crying. She's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
She sells it for me so intensely. I was such an interesting, and I think it prevents it from being too problematized in one sense, because it's not saying, oh, Buffy realizes she's actually not crazy. You know, it's like, no, she has had difficulties, and this is preying on that.
Yeah.
And what goes hand in hand with that is, in the normal again reality, the way that the other Joyce is really trying to say to her, I know you can do this, come back to me. Like, it's very compelling. She's not like an arch like fake person.
No, she never, like, in the standard portrayal in that situation, if you are going a more straightforward route, is to have Joyce at some point slip and turn into Gollum. Not Gollum, you know, like when Bilbo does Gollum face and have that for a moment or something, or like or a touch of sinisterness about her. But no, Joyce is portrayed as Joyce and not a touch of sinister to her, you know?
Like, it's so convincing that for a second you're kind of like, maybe Buffy, like, it should go with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so her having to, you know, come to this realization and make this commitment with no hard evidence, that, you know, Joyce convinced her she's strong enough to make the right choice, and Buffy's like, yeah, I am, goodbye forever if you are real.
Yeah.
It's such a I actually think it's a tremendous show of strength of personality, on par with like her catching the sword. Do you know what I mean? It's right up there with like, she is absolutely no, or jumping at the end of the game.
Season 5, yeah.
She has no way of knowing for certain, but she has to do what she feels is right. And I think it's maybe an underrated performance in this episode. Yeah.
I'd agree. You know what I love about our podcast is whenever I go into an episode, like, I mean, I had a rating in mind when I sat down. I won't say what it was, but like when we started talking about it and we're like saying, oh, I was excited about this part and I really like this part, and you were saying some stuff that I was like, oh yeah, that's a great point, that's really cool. I can feel my rating go up,
creeping up.
Yeah, and it's really nice. Anyway, so yeah, I think the other like minor thing to discuss there is just Xander comes back from his hiatus from having
Where'd he go?
Who fucking knows? He left Anya at the altar. He's come back. He looks worse than ever, honestly. Just Nicholas Brendan was not having a good time in this period of his life, I'm guessing. He just looks tired and sad.
I like a lot of his acting is like really painting for the back row. Like it's really like pantomime-y.
Yeah, whereas like I think Nicholas Brendan at his best moments in terms of his portrayal of the character is light, fluffy, and like quippy. In this episode, it feels just desperate. He feels like the I'll never remember the name of the episode. He feels like the split Xander, the bad one in this episode. What's that called? The Replacement. It's called The Replacement. He feels like the replacement Xander. And he wants to make up with Anya and keep going out, even though he freaked out about this stuff. And you're kind of like, she deserves better than you, actually. But whatever. Willow has a couple of nice moments because Willow she's psyching herself up to go. She has a speech written where she has insert date here stuff, to go talk to Tara to ask her to hang out with her again, date her again, and she's been magic free for so long. And she goes to the college, one of the last views I'd have to imagine of the college, and Tara gets like a very nothing kiss on the cheek from a friend, and Willow freaks out and runs away.
What's actually funny about that is one of the things that she gets insecure about is Willow's like, oh, maybe it was just a friend, because I always go around just kissing my friends on the cheek and touching them. And
she says kissing my friends on the lips, but it was a kiss on the cheek, which was really weird.
Yeah, or maybe it was kissing my friends with my lips or something. But my point is, that was written by a straight person, because like queer people do have affection for each other. Like you wouldn't necessarily see someone greeting someone, kissing them on the cheek, and be like, they are definitely sleeping together.
Yeah, but like, it's such a nice aspect of queer culture is like like kissing the cheek to say hi. Anyway.
Intimacy. Exactly. You try it sometime.
So it was interesting for those reasons. Should we move into the dusting, Joe?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I have some Buffy bits for you.
Hit me with your Buffy stick.
This is the 5th and final appearance of Hank Summers. Most of them, I believe, were off camera. This is the first episode without Anya since she became a regular in season 4. It's the final appearance of the Dulmy Palace, though Buffy continues to work there until the episode lessens.
And we see that manager recur as well.
Sorry, 1 second. But Markfield notes that the fight that takes place in the basement is in the basement, i.e. Buffy's subconscious, and she is trying to remove her spirit, her mind, and her childhood self to potentially like erase those things so that she can have an easygoing life, and that's obviously not a very good idea. He also discusses a lot about the potential retcon implications of the asylum, because why did Joyce not remember any of this when Buffy came out to her or whatever?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. Yeah.
And there's some other time related retcon aspects there. I don't give a shit. I think it's a good note, and I think it's worth writing in. And
to be fair, I think Joyce is very broadly like, you had undisclosed troubles when that happened in Hemery High or whatever.
Yeah.
Hemery High. Yeah.
That's all my Buffy bits. Do you have any, Joe?
Yeah, so I thought it was, I think we see the progression of time in the show, because when she's going to hunt down the trio or the troika, she has a colour printout from a webpage of potential listings, you know? Whereas when the show started, it was all like Filofax pages and stuff, you know? So I really felt like we're kind of approaching the modern modern day there. I thought the monster was great. I thought the monster design was just weird and alien and kind of very, very, very well done. There's a weird note where Spike says that Buffy loves to have ice in the back of her neck. And it's like, where is that possibly coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just have I two linked notes here. One is where I said Xander's so selfish, and then afterwards I said I actually feel a little sorry for him at this point. So. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of my main thing. And obviously we have the magic box that's kind of absent from this episode as well, because Anya has closed it. Oh, and also something we didn't mention, as Tara turns up at the end of the episode to save everyone, and there is no explanation for why she's there that we were able to recall or discern.
Yeah, she hasn't been invited to the house or anything. She just turns up, and
there wasn't even a throwaway line.
Lets herself in and stuff. Yeah, maybe we missed it, but we couldn't see it. We couldn't find it. Okay, some fashion notes for you there, Joe. I actually quite liked Buffy's look in the asylum. It was a little bit heroin chic, which, obviously a problematic term, but
Slayer interrupted.
It is very Slayer interrupted. I quite like the brown turtleneck that Buffy was wearing.
I thought it was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was lovely. I thought it was very nice. Xander looked awful. I didn't hate his shirt. It was like the pattern on it wasn't the worst thing in the world. You might maybe see someone today wearing it, but he's wearing oversized baggy brown leather jacket and stuff. It looks bad. Willow was wearing her jeans cuffed, and I was like, oh, maybe she is a bisexual. Mm-hmm. It's possible. And at one point you see Jonathan is wearing a graphic t-shirt, and it has the "Oh really" owl, remember, from the very early internet.
Oh God, yeah.
Which, I mean, I was like, it's 2002, was that likely to be a meme at that point? But I'm pretty sure it was the "Oh really" owl.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Warren's hair was high to God. Like, it was there was a good half a foot of hair straight up. Yeah. I thought Buffy looked great. I thought Michelle Dong looked very chic as well. Huge hoop earrings, which are difficult to pull off. But I think she looked quite well. And yeah, I thought that Willow, I suppose all leading up to the tragedy, but Willow just looked really comfortable in herself. She had a nice sense of style. I think she went through a period where I felt like she was trying different things, which is actually quite a relatable queer trope as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Kind of going through the Mr. Ben wardrobe of like, what style do I have? And she felt very kind of like well established individual style in this episode, which I enjoyed.
Absolutely. Okay, death count there, Joel.
Death count. So we have a single death, unless you count the brain death of Buffy in the asylum. Mm-hmm. But within the fiction, one Glarg Ghoul Kashmashnik demon punched through the chest by Buffy.
Wow. Okay, great. Okay, and what is your rating, Joel?
I would think I would give this episode maybe like a 9.8. A 9.8 Glarg Ghoul Kashmashnik spikes.
Wow.
There was maybe one or two notes in it that didn't land for me, but I actually thought, you know what, I love this. I think it is great fantasy, great horror. It is, I think, genre, like subgenre defining. Like when I think of this kind of the episode, I think of Normal Gang, even though I don't remember the name of it. I thought the performance was really sold. I think it's a great example of what a show like this can be. Yeah.
Very good. I'm going to give it 9.2 coffee, food, kisses, or gay love out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, I loved it as well. It's a classic one for me. I definitely appreciate it more on this viewing than I have in previous viewings. I think it's it doesn't quite reach the heights of Buffy's brilliant moments, but it's intriguing, fascinating, and yeah, like so important, and I think just enjoyable and good, and a very pivotal moment for our heroine. So I love that shit. Okay,
our chic heroine.
Okay, Cordelia Chase, pretty significant this week as well.
Yeah, pretty meaty one. So we were watching Forgiving over on the Cordelia Chase. Chased her right out of town. I think she's still in Hawaii on the show at the moment. And essentially this follows on from the big betrayal at the end of the last episode. And there's not just a really meaty stuff in it. There's them trying to establish who Sajong is, the demon who has kind of caused all this trouble. Why it turns out that he was made incorporeal along with his brethren by Wolfram and Hart because they were so dangerous and so time-bendy, etc. in the past. We get a little bit of a shot of what is essentially an Evil Dead 3 set of him fighting about Evil Knight. But we get Angel on very much on a mission. We get some classic Dark Angel moments where he's kidnapped the head of Wolfram Hart's special projects, and we see him basically torturing him with one of those spikes you put receipts on. There's some quite sinisterness about that. And we really see the recurring problem Angel has of just more than any other character in the Buffyverse taking no instruction and no help from anyone, no matter how many times he fucks things up by not doing that. It's frustrating. We see more inside Wolfram Hart. Eventually he gets to the White Room, which is this interdimensional space in Wolfram Hart where you can kind of commune with the senior partners. Spooky little girl. It's quite fun. That comes up a lot as the show goes on further as well. And then kind of really like some good lore moments trying to track down where is Connor, that the Korthos dimension is something which is so horrible that you can't even open a portal to it, and how you tear your way back there, etc. And kind of Angel being driven to these really kind of, again, driven to an extreme and driven away from his team.
And then the side-ish plot is Fred and Gunn trying to track down Wesley, trying to find out what he found out, and eventually finding his diary entry which said the father would kill the son, and tracking down what's her name again, Justine, who had the crap beaten out of her by this point, and eventually finding Warren because she experiences a flash of guilt. Wesley, sorry. She experiences a flash of guilt when she remembers that she slashed his throat. They find him. He's been hospitalized at that point? No, the homeless person just stole from him and
robbed him, which is a terrible trope. I was hoping he would just help him.
Yeah, I know. And it's also like useless for the episode. It doesn't advance anything.
Yeah. So part of the tension of the episode is that Wesley's had his throat cut outside of his apartment, and they're at his apartment and miss him and are looking everywhere for him.
Which, I mean, you can't survive that long without your throat cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
They find him eventually anyway, and they bring him to the hospital, and that's kind of like there. And there's a weird tension between Gunn and Fred, because Fred is very concerned about Wesley more so than she probably should be. You know?
Yeah. So like, just great character development. The stakes are high. I believe in the plot. Like, I believe in the threat.
And then the conclusion being.
Yeah. So basically, like, we have the setup and the twist that they set you up for the fall is they explain to Angel, of course Wesley had a reason to do this. And actually Sajang admits that he forged the prophecy to because Connor was destined to kill him, and instead they wanted to get Connor to be killed. Wesley had a reason. It was a very difficult decision. He did everything he could. He was trying to protect you and Connor. And we're like, oh, okay, we've avoided kind of disaster here. And Angel goes to the hospital, and they really lay it on where it's like, Angel, he'll be so happy to see you. It's so great you've come here to forgive him, etc. Yeah. He goes in and he says, I understand why you did it. Just want to make it very clear. I'm not unjealous. I'm Angel. This is me. And then tries to suffocate Wesley with a pillow. It's a scene I found very shocking the first time I watched it. It's a little hammy now, because he doesn't sound like Angel. He's like, I'll kill you, Price. You're dead to me. And it's like, it's effective, but like, if you wanted to kill him, you could just snap his neck. Yeah. But it is like, it's a classic kind of shocking cliffhanger moment of Wesley like clawing for air, and Angel being like, I will kill you for what you have done, and like the relationship being sundered, and really spends like the vast majority of the rest of the show trying to recover from that. Like, even when they eventually rejoin, they're never really friends again. So it's super, super tragic, because like it's very clear that Wesley did everything he probably reasonably could, and he's always been the most level-headed, and he had very strong reasons based on Angel's behavior here as well to not trust his reaction. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would give it again another solid kind of 9 failed feminist gestures.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 9 failed feminist gestures as well. I'd probably give it, if I was I have to stop doing this, I'd probably give it somewhere around 8.6, 8.7. Definitely worse than Buffy this week, thankfully, though a really strong episode. I really, really enjoyed it. I found it dramatic, moment to moment enjoyable. Sometimes I find scenes with Fred and Gunn a little dull, honestly, and it's the Angel stuff and the Wesley stuff, and
potentially Fred and Gunn don't have great chemistry.
They don't, and they don't have.
They're real Joey and Rachel.
Yeah, and Gunn has very little character to this point written for him, So, and Fred is also like, I think Fred, when she gets a bit more vicious, is much more fun, but at this point, Angel is even the stuff with Wolfram Hart is more fun, I think. But yeah, no, I find it threatening. I find it enjoyable to watch. So I really liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all from us for this week. Thank you as always for joining us. Very happy to have you here. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends, tell your parents in the real world who miss you and love you and want you to come back. And we will see you next time right here on Buffy Boys.
See ya.